Justin Vautier, CEO of Calyx CPA here. Today I'm here with Kevin Jacoby from Jacoby Law, kind of a well-known tax, or not tax attorney, I'm sorry, I'm the tax person.
I'm not a tax
The
attorney.
attorney. Kevin's an attorney. And I know him because we have mutual clients and we've been working on getting our clients in compliance to get their certificate of compliance from the Oregon Department of Revenue. So for those of you who don't know, and many people who might be watching this are from out of state, so they're outside of Oregon, but Oregon Department of Revenue requires that, or no, I apologize, the OLCC requires that the licensees obtain what's called a certificate of compliance from the Oregon Department of Revenue, indicating that their taxes, they're in compliance with the Department of Revenue. So I don't want to talk much more about it, Kevin. I'd rather pass it on to you so that you can educate, inform, and update
Yeah,
our clients and the
yeah,
people who this is required of. And maybe, and I know it's pretty controversial because at least on the surface it's very arduous, like they're really asking a lot, and a lot of people realistically aren't being able to comply because they're asking for too much. So take it away, Kevin.
yeah. Thank you, Justin. So the certificate of tax compliance applies to all marijuana retailers in Oregon. And it is required you're required to provide a certificate of tax compliance every year at renewal. This is the first calendar year that this requirement has been in effect. And there have been several hiccups that have caused OLCC to offer additional extensions and go back to their rulemaking and allow for more indefinite indefinite extensions in hardship cases, of which there are many. And to date, I have not yet seen OLCC shut anybody down for failing to submit a certificate of tax compliance, although I have seen threats to do so. But their OLCC seems to have a policy of not full enforcement of this as of yet. I
Right.
think
And
they're trying to get
like,
people up to speed.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just to go back a little bit in terms of what compliance means. Now, I remember that at least initially, compliance meant marijuana sales tax compliance. And then Oregon extended that not only to that, but corporate income tax, payroll taxes. I mean, there's little known like penalties and whatnot. Like there's a lot of payroll forms that they would be out of compliance if they didn't have all their payroll forms in, or if they had like $100 penalty outstanding, they'd be in non-compliance. But then it even extends to, according to, at least initially, according to some of my clients, they were saying that they would need to be in compliance for the shareholders and the partners of the businesses. So like their income taxes need to be filed and paid. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the questions that I've had is like, are they really enforcing this in terms of, do they still require that, say, like if you have a partnership of 10 people, do all those people, all those people expected to be in compliance?
So everybody who qualifies as an applicant under an OLCC or under OLCC's definition of applicant, which means any person owning or controlling more than 20% of the company, has to also get a personal certificate of compliance,
Oh,
which
wow.
means that they have to be in compliance, either fully paid or on a payment plan for personal income taxes.
Yeah.
So, this being the first tax year that this is coming up, a lot of what I've seen at least, and probably you've seen, is a lot of cannabis operators have kind of put filing their tax returns on the back burner for a long time. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of back work that has to be done. There's a lot of back bookkeeping that has to be done going back years. And so it's a labor intensive and arduous process. And I don't think OLCC fully realizes how much work that entails.
Right.
So the biggest thing is for cannabis retailers in Oregon is to get a relationship with a tax preparation firm, with a CPA, and get on it now. Get on it well in advance of your renewal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and going off of your previous comment about it being controversial, it is quite controversial.
Yeah.
Because we see these certificate of tax compliance in other contexts like daycares and whatnot, but I've in those other contexts, they don't require you to drill down to the personal income taxes of the owners.
Right.
And so that just deals with the tax compliance, and those situations are just deal with corporate tax compliance. So and so essentially what's required is now of retailers only is proactive compliance with all state level taxes. They don't care so much about federal compliance. They don't care at all about federal compliance, actually. But you're obviously, in order to prepare a state return, you've got to prepare the federal return too. Whether you file it or not is is up to you. But so it's just it's a mess.
Yeah.
But on the subject of controversy, there is very little in the way of legislative authority for this. And I'm being generous when I say very little, because actually there's no legislative authority for this. This came out by fiat from the governor, as a way to get around her the LaModa scandal that happened last year. So that was the genesis of this. It's purely a political move to punish an entire sector for the misdeeds of one bad actor.
Yeah. Yeah. How well, I guess I can't ask how LaModa's doing, because even if you knew, I imagine you wouldn't tell.
But I don't, so
I haven't seen any updates. I haven't seen anybody losing their licenses either. But is that just because you aren't aware of them, or from what you can tell, there hasn't been any yet?
From what I can tell, there hasn't been any yet. They are being right now, OLCC is being proactive about letting people know that they've got deadlines coming up to supply them, and say, hey, if you don't give us the certificate of tax compliance by this date, at least get a request for an extension in by that date.
Yeah.
And if you if you make a request, they will grant it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been working with a handful of people who are getting these kind of these threats, like, hey, you need it in by 30 days, you need it in by 60 days. And then some of them we've gotten through and they've gotten their certificate of compliance. Some of them we're still in the process of working on them. And so I'm glad to hear that they are being would you say that they're being reasonable and flexible in terms of as long as you've hired the right help and you're moving towards getting into compliance, they're being good about granting extensions?
Yeah, if you can demonstrate really, so all they really care about in these extensions is that you can demonstrate that you're not significantly in arrears on marijuana tax payments. I've had a couple of clients who have are like a month or 2 months behind, and they've granted the extension.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, as long as they get into payment plans, or they have I mean, I could imagine that seems reasonable to me, specifically around marijuana taxes, as well as like maybe payroll taxes. The
Mhm.
income tax is what kind of gets me, because I understand that marijuana tax and payroll taxes are other people's money, because like you collected marijuana tax on behalf of Oregon Department of Revenue, and so that's other people's money that you now owe. Same with payroll taxes. And frankly, like the federal government looks at payroll taxes the same, that it's a criminal offense to not be up to date with your payroll taxes, because you withheld that money from your employee's paycheck. And if you don't remit that, then it's a criminal offense with very steep penalties, 100% penalties. And they will actually shut you down if you get too far behind. Whereas income taxes, which is based on your net income, right? They're, at least with the federal government, is a lot more flexible about working with you to collect that over time, and the penalties are not nearly as steep. So I always like to give people warnings, like if you can't pay your taxes, the income taxes, like federal income tax, is probably the last thing you want to pay. Anything having to do with Oregon, you want to get that paid, and especially payroll taxes. Never get behind on payroll taxes. Instead, just stop paying your employees so that you're not accumulating more, because it's you'll have to like close. You're going to have to do something. If you start getting behind on payroll taxes, then you're really on your last leg. That's what, and they'll come after you personally. No amount of corporate corporate entity will get you out of being responsible for getting those taxes paid. So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, so as far as the, like you were saying, so are we getting better about like trying to rein it in a little bit legislatively, so that the businesses will only be accountable for, like, say, marijuana taxes and payroll taxes, or is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Because really, like, penalizing one investor because of another investor's lack of regard for the rules, that seems pretty unfair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as far as I know, there's no legislative effort to overturn this or tweak this rule. And that not for lack of want, but just there's too many priorities. There is a challenge to the rules that's currently pending that I have filed on behalf of one of my clients. And but that's probably not going to be decided for another year or two.
Right.
Opening brief is due in the next couple months. So, but that in that challenge, because there is a pending rule challenge, OLCC is going to, because they know that I'm on it, that I'm on the case, and if OLCC makes a move to cancel or non-renew a license based on this, they know that I'll very quickly join them to the lawsuit and get a stay of the rule. In fact, that was the thing. I think we filed the lawsuit because the client was coming up on their deadlines, and I couldn't get OLCC to even respond to a request for an extension at that time.
Yeah.
So I filed the rule challenge, and I filed a motion to stay enforcement of the rules pending the rule challenge, much like the way what happened last summer with the Aspergillus rule challenge. And in response, OLCC said, "Oh, there's no need to stay this rule because we've given them an extension." So,
yeah. Interesting.
And the court was like, "Okay, there's no exigency here." So, and that particular client is is very close to getting their compliance certificate in any event, but they're still challenging the rule.
So that's interesting. So a good like kind of call to action is if you feel like you're getting on the cusp of these extensions you've done is like say you're a cannabis business and you've done you're doing everything that you can in order to get into compliance and you but you're getting to the extension deadline and you feel like you're going to potentially go over that and you haven't been granted another extension, maybe give you a call, Kevin, right? And then
Right.
because it seems to me that what you're saying is like as soon as somebody gets to the point where they might lose their license, you can slap down a like, hey, there's no legislative authority card on this,
Right.
and then the whole thing kind of comes to a grinding halt.
Yes, that's the idea.
Well,
And but that's the but that you know and but the thing is OLCC and I are kind of in a Mexican standoff, if you will, because they know that that's the idea. So
yeah,
they don't want to give that to me.
no,
So,
no, so they're going to
which is
be
fine. It's good. It's good for everybody if you know if you have enough time to get into compliance.
yeah, yeah.
But you know, 60
That's
even
I,
60 90 days in a lot of cases is not enough time.
it's not enough time. It's not enough time, especially for people who may have not filed tax returns for years, and
Which is,
now we're
I would
rebuilding.
venture to guess, is a large percentage of you know, prior to this year, I would say a large percentage of marijuana retailers had never filed taxes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then it kind of comes back to like 280E and all that stuff.
Right.
Like if you are having, I'm not plugging my, I am plugging myself. Okay, I'm plugging Calyx now, but if you only know the rules on the surface level, then you're, of course, the businesses do not want to file at least federal taxes because federal taxes will bury them in tax debt, like and on phantom income. And for a while there, we were seeing like 80 to 90% effective tax rates. So like
Mhm.
for every $100 you made, you paid 80 to 90%, and that was completely unsustainable. And but now especially with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act 471C, and now the five multi-state operators, the large companies that are challenging 280E, truly having gotten their money back or having gotten refunds, and then the applicability of the Controlled Substances Act being challenged and run up the legal ladder, not as well as the HSA recommending that cannabis be a Schedule 3, along with all the acts of Congress that kind of legitimizes the idea of state sovereignty over the Controlled Substances Act or over their own cannabis regulation. It just begs the question, does 280 really apply, or should it have applied? Should it have ever applied? And there's a lot of good argument for why that isn't,
Mhm.
why it shouldn't have applied. And so more people are now taking the risk of moving forward without reducing deductions for 280E, not potentially amending their refunds in order to get their money back. But up until then, I mean, but there's still still accountants and tax attorneys that are saying like, hey, you have to prepare these returns like as if 280, like there's no tools for you, And it's
Right.
mostly people are like in general practices that they don't do this day in and day out. They've got a big portfolio of all sorts of different business clients, and then cannabis is only a very small part of their portfolio. So they don't dedicate the time to get educated on what can be done. And then even if they were, how to prepare a return properly in order for it to be defensible. So anyway, that's what's
Yeah.
happening. That's most accountants out there.
Yeah. That's what I'm hearing as well. And again, I
So
want to
it's
preface
like, oh
on.
my God, so what they're doing is they're maybe getting in compliance with Oregon, but they're still not filing the federal tax returns.
Mhm.
So anyway, you can
Yeah.
send Kevin.
I will. But yeah, so again, not a tax attorney. I don't practice in tax court, but 280E is not a thing under for state taxation.
Right.
So don't let that be scare you away from filing, at least filing your Oregon returns if you're a retailer. Another thing to be on the lookout for in the future is I understand from the people who are in the Rules Advisory Committee about these tax compliance rules that the OLCC staff was really pushing for these rules to apply to the industry in total, when the governor's directive was just for retailers. So be on the lookout for more future rulemaking to expand this concept, assuming that the court doesn't step in beforehand, to expand this concept to producers, wholesalers.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I got mixed messages as to whether or not it applied to everybody else or if it was just retailers. And I had thought it was just retailers, and when I was looking it up, but then I got feedback from other people saying, hey, they were being pressured to get a certificate of compliance. And I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, oh, it's only for retailers. And they were like saying, no, it's not. And then now I know.
Yeah, it's definitely only retailers. There was like I said, OLCC, their original permanent rule draft was to expand it to all. But the membership of the Rules Advisory Committee, which is industry stakeholders, pushed back on that very strongly.
Yeah,
That it was wildly expanding the scope of the governor's directive. So they won the day on that, but that doesn't foreclose OLCC from trying again in the future. So
yeah, okay. What was the percentage ownership again for
it's 20%. 20% or more is the threshold for being an applicant. And if you're an applicant, then you have to get your own tax compliance. They want tax compliance certificates all the way down the ownership structure to natural.
Okay. All right, Kevin. Well, your video on my side is freezing, so we probably shouldn't push it too much. Do you have a website, Kevin? All right. Well, I think that kind of concludes our little interview, Kevin. And all right. Well, for those of you who might have been watching this, Kevin Jacoby Law, probably could easily be found on Google, and you can always reach out to me and I can share his contact information with you.